Sonia nodded as Dr. Morrison spoke, but her mind was miles away. The doctor's voice faded into a dull hum as the image of the boy from her dream rose vividly behind her eyes, the dead flowers, the sorrow in his gaze, the warning that had wrapped itself around her heart like a curse. Everything appeared normal, the doctor had said. Yet nothing about this felt normal to Sonia. She forced a smile, murmured her thanks, and let Fred guide her out of the office, his excitement spilling over with every step. He talked endlessly about nursery colors, baby names, and how long he'd waited for this moment, but Sonia barely responded. Her hand rested protectively over her stomach, not in joy, but in fear. That night, while Fred slept peacefully beside her, Sonia lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the boy's words over and over again. You need to find out what your husband did. The thought made her chest tighten. Fred had always been kind, patient, and loving, but what if there were parts of his past she didn't know? The name Marcus Green echoed in her mind like a ticking clock. By morning, her joy had fully cuddled into unease. She began noticing small things she had never questioned before, Fred's sudden tension when she mentioned old friends, the way he avoided certain topics, the sharpness in his voice when his mother spoke of sacrifices made for this family. Sonia started searching quietly, scrolling through old emails, old photographs, even public records, all while pretending everything was fine. And with every passing day, her body changed, her nausea worsened, her dreams grew darker, and the boy returned night after night, each time standing closer, his voice more urgent, his eyes filled not with malice but with grief. Sonia realized then that this pregnancy was not the miracle she had prayed for all those years, it was a reckoning. Whatever Fred had done, whatever secret was buried beneath their 10 years of marriage, it was growing inside her now, feeding, waiting. And deep down, Sonia knew with chilling certainty that if she didn't uncover the truth soon, the child she had waited a lifetime for would take that lifetime away from her. The dream refused to loosen its grip on Sonia, clinging to her thoughts like a shadow that grew longer as the day faded. No matter how hard she tried to distract herself, by folding laundry, cooking dinner, or smiling through Fred's cheerful chatter, the image of the boy in the dead field lingered in her mind. His eyes, wide and sorrowful, haunted her more than his warning ever could. He had not sounded cruel. He had sounded afraid. Afraid for her. And that frightened Sonia more than anything else. By the time Fred kissed her goodnight and drifted into sleep, exhaustion weighed heavy on her body, yet her mind burned with restless urgency. She lay beside him for nearly an hour, staring into the darkness, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. Each rise and fall of his chest felt like a betrayal, proof that he slept peacefully while her world quietly unraveled. The baby inside her stirred, or perhaps it was only her imagination, but the sensation made her stomach twist. She could not wait any longer. Carefully, Sonia slipped out of bed and padded down the hallway, every floorboard creak sounding impossibly loud in the silence. She paused at Fred's study door, her hand hovering over the knob. Guilt flooded her chest. This was wrong. Marriage was built on trust. She had never once invaded his privacy in 10 years together. But another thought rose louder than the guilt, colder and sharper. If you deliver that child, you will die. Her hand tightened. She opened the door. The room smelled faintly of coffee and old books. Moonlight filtered through the blinds, casting thin silver lines across Fred's desk. His laptop sat there, closed, as if waiting. Sonia hesitated only a moment before opening it. The screen glowed to life, illuminating her pale face and the fear etched deep into her eyes. Her fingers trembled as she typed his password, her birthday, as always. The familiarity stung. She began with his email, telling herself this was only to put her mind at ease. She searched for the name exactly as it had echoed in her dream. Marcus Green. Nothing. She tried variations. Marcus. M. Green. Green Marcus. Still nothing. Her pulse quickened, disappointment mixing with a strange sense of relief. Maybe the dream was nothing more than stress, hormones, fear after so many years of disappointment. But the unease didn't fade. She moved on to his document folders, opening files she had never seen before, work reports, scanned contracts, tax forms. Everything looked painfully normal. Too normal. She checked his browser history next, scrolling back months, then years. Fertility clinics. Medical articles. Parenting blogs. Nothing that hinted at secrets or dark bargains. Her shoulders sagged, tension coiling tight in her chest. I'm doing this for nothing, she thought. I'm letting fear poison everything. Then, almost as an afterthought, she opened the synced contact list from his phone. And there it was. Marcus Green. No photo. Just a number. And beneath it, a single line of text that made Sonia's breath catch in her throat. Do not call unless absolutely necessary. Her heart slammed violently against her ribs. She stared at the screen, reading the note over and over, hoping it would change, hoping she had misunderstood. But the words remained, stark and deliberate. Why would Fred have a contact like that? Why keep it after all these years? Her mouth went dry. She reached for her own phone, fingers numb, and copied the number before she could talk herself out of it. Every instinct screamed at her to stop, to close the laptop, to crawl back into bed and pretend none of this existed. But she pressed call. The ringing felt impossibly loud in the silent house. Once. Twice. 3 times. On the 4th ring, someone answered. Hello, the man said. His voice was smooth, almost pleasant, but beneath it lay something sharp and cold, like steel hidden under velvet. Well, he continued softly. This is unexpected. Sonia's throat tightened. Who is this? She whispered, instinctively glancing down the hallway toward the bedroom. You already know, the man replied. Otherwise, you wouldn't be calling. Her heart pounded. How do you know who I am? A faint chuckle drifted through the line. Because I've been expecting this call. Just not from you. Her grip tightened around the phone. What do you mean? I assume, he went on calmly, that you're pregnant now. The casual way he said it, like commenting on the weather, sent ice flooding through her veins. Who are you? Sonia demanded, her voice shaking despite her effort to sound strong. And what do you have to do with my husband? There was a brief pause, just long enough to make her dread what came next. My name is Marcus Green, the man said. And 10 years ago, your husband came to me with a problem. Sonia sank into the desk chair, her legs suddenly weak. What problem? You, Marcus replied simply. Or rather, the fact that you couldn't get pregnant. He was desperate. Grieving. Angry at the world. And desperate men make interesting choices. I don't understand, Sonia whispered. What did you do? I provided a solution. Her stomach churned. What kind of solution? The kind that always works, Marcus said smoothly. But every solution comes with a cost. Sonia's heart hammered painfully. What cost? Your husband signed a contract, Marcus continued. Did he never tell you about it? A contract. Sonia repeated, her voice barely audible. For what? For a child. Her breath hitched. And the cost? Marcus didn't answer immediately. When he finally did, his voice was colder. The child requires payment. Fear exploded in her chest. Payment how? Sonia, Marcus said quietly, almost gently, the price for this pregnancy is your life. Her phone slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the desk. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. The room seemed to tilt, the walls closing in as a roaring filled her ears. Her hands shook so violently she had to clutch the edge of the desk to steady herself. This isn't real. This can't be real. She grabbed the phone again, pressing it to her ear with trembling hands. You're lying, she whispered. You have to be lying. Am I? Marcus replied calmly. Then why did you call me? Why have you been dreaming about this exact warning? Her blood ran cold. How do you know about my dreams? Another soft chuckle. Because the contract doesn't end with signatures and ink. It leaves echoes. Tears blurred her vision. There has to be a way out, she pleaded. There has to be something we can do. There might be, Marcus admitted slowly. But it would require your husband to tell you the truth. To admit what he did. And to face the consequences of his choices. Sonia closed her eyes, Fred's smiling face flashing through her mind. He wouldn't do this, she whispered. He loves me. Love and desperation are not opposites, Marcus said. They often walk hand in hand. And in my experience, desperate people rarely choose sacrifice for themselves. Her voice broke. So that's it. I just die. I'm afraid so, Marcus replied. Unless your husband decides otherwise. And will he? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Marcus sighed softly. Most people would rather let others pay for their mistakes. The line went dead. Sonia sat alone in the dark living room long after the call ended, the phone resting uselessly in her lap. The house felt different now, colder, heavier, as though something unseen had settled into its walls. Her thoughts spiraled, racing between disbelief and terror. Tears blurred her vision. There has to be a way out, she pleaded. There has to be something we can do. There might be, Marcus admitted slowly. But it would require your husband to tell you the truth. To admit what he did. And to face the consequences of his choices. Sonia closed her eyes, Fred's smiling face flashing through her mind. He wouldn't do this, she whispered. He loves me. Love and desperation are not opposites, Marcus said. They often walk hand in hand. And in my experience, desperate people rarely choose sacrifice for themselves. Her voice broke. So that's it. I just die. I'm afraid so, Marcus replied. Unless your husband decides otherwise. And will he? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Marcus sighed softly. Most people would rather let others pay for their mistakes. The line went dead. Sonia sat alone in the dark living room long after the call ended, the phone resting uselessly in her lap. The house felt different now, colder, heavier, as though something unseen had settled into its walls. Her thoughts spiraled, racing between disbelief and terror. Could it really be true? She thought of Fred's joy that morning, his tears of happiness, the way he had held her like she might disappear. Was it all guilt? Or had he convinced himself that she would never know, that the price would never come due? The clock on the wall ticked relentlessly, each second echoing like a countdown. By the time she finally returned to bed, the sky outside had begun to pale with the first hints of dawn. Fred shifted slightly as she slipped under the covers, murmuring something in his sleep. Sonia turned onto her side and stared at his face in the soft moonlight, memorizing every familiar line. For the first time in 10 years, she wondered if she had ever truly known the man lying beside her. And as her hand drifted instinctively to her stomach, a single terrifying thought took hold. If the child was his miracle, then she was its sacrifice. The next morning arrived wrapped in an uneasy calm, the kind that felt artificial, as though the world itself were pretending nothing was wrong. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, warm and gentle, illuminating the familiar routines of breakfast and small talk. Fred hummed softly as he poured coffee, smiling at Sonia with the same tenderness he always had. To anyone watching, they looked like a couple basking in long-awaited happiness. But inside Sonia, dread coiled tightly, silent and patient. She had decided the night before that she could not live like this, not with a ticking clock inside her body, not with a truth she was forbidden to speak. Today, she would confront Fred. Today, she would force the truth into the open. Yet the moment she opened her mouth, something went wrong. "Fred," she began, her heart pounding, "I need to talk to you about." Her throat constricted painfully, as if invisible fingers had wrapped themselves around her windpipe. Panic flared. She felt the word forming in her mind, sharp and clear. Marcus. But her lips betrayed her. "What we're having for lunch," she finished helplessly. Fred blinked, brow furrowing. "Lunch?" He studied her face carefully. "Are you feeling okay, treasure? You seem distracted." Sonia nodded too quickly. "Just tired," she said, though her voice trembled. Her pulse roared in her ears. That had been strange. Nerves, maybe. Fear. She tried to steady herself. A few minutes later, she tried again. "There's something important I need to tell you," she said slowly, carefully. "The contract," she thought. "The deal you made." But instead, the words twisted mid-sentence. "My mother is coming to visit." Fred froze. "Your mother? When?" Sonia stared at him in horror. She hadn't meant to say that. She hadn't even thought it. The realization hit her with crushing force. Something was stopping her. The rest of the morning passed in a haze of failed attempts. Every time she steered the conversation toward Marcus Green, toward secrets or consequences, her body rebelled. Her tongue refused to cooperate. Her throat closed. Her words reshaped themselves into harmless nonsense, whether errands, recipes, trivialities. By noon, Sonia was shaking. It wasn't fear anymore. It was certainty. The deal Fred had made didn't just demand her life. It demanded her silence. The truth hit her so hard she had to sit down. Whatever contract he had signed was not bound by paper alone. It had rules. Safeguards. And one of them ensured that the sacrifice could not be won. She couldn't confront him. She couldn't ask him to break the contract. She literally could not say the words. Panic turned desperate. There had to be another way. That afternoon, while Fred was in the shower, Sonia grabbed a notebook from the drawer. Her hands trembled as she wrote, pressing the pen hard into the paper as if force alone might help. "Fred, you made a deal with Marcus Green." The moment she finished writing the name, it exploded beneath her fingers. She screamed as the paper burst into flames. Fire licked up the page, unnaturally fast, consuming the words in seconds. Sonia dropped it with a cry, stumbling back as it disintegrated into ash before it even hit the floor. The ashes didn't scatter. They vanished. No smoke. No residue. No evidence it had ever existed. Sonia collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. Still, she tried again. She typed the message into her phone, fingers flying in frantic desperation. "You made a deal. Marcus Green. Please listen." Every message erased itself before she could press send. She tried voice notes. The recordings played back as silence. She tried drawing symbols, stick figures, crude images meant to hint at danger. The paper remained blank. The curse was flawless. That night, sleep came not as rest but as surrender. Sonia found herself once again standing in the field of dead flowers. The sky above was grey and heavy, pressing down like a lid. The little boy stood before her, his familiar sorrowful eyes meeting hers. But this time, he was not alone. Behind him stood dozens of women. All of them pregnant. All of them pale. Their eyes held the same hollow grief, the same understanding that made Sonia's knees weaken. "We all made the same mistake," one woman said quietly. "We trusted the wrong person," another whispered. Sonia's voice shook. Are you all dead? A third woman stepped forward, her hand resting on her swollen belly. We are the price that was paid. Cold terror wrapped around Sonia's heart. Just as you will be, another voice added softly, unless you break the pattern. The boy stepped closer. You can't tell your husband directly, he said. The clause prevents it. Then what do I do? Sonia pleaded. How do I stop this? Make him remember, the boy said. Make him face what he buried. How? His conscience knows the truth, even if his mouth denies it. Create a crisis. Force him to choose. Between what? She whispered. Between his desire for the child, and his love for you. Sonia woke with a gasp, her heart racing. By morning, she had a plan. Over the next few days, Sonia became a stranger in her own home. She stopped eating, claiming relentless nausea. Her skin grew pale. Dark circles formed beneath her eyes. She moved slowly, weakly, like someone fading. She fainted the first time in the kitchen. Fred caught her just in time, terror flooding his face. The second time, she collapsed in the living room. That's it, Fred said, panic breaking through his composure. I'm taking you to the hospital. No, Sonia whispered weakly. The doctors can't help me. This isn't a medical problem. Fred stared at her. Then what is it? Sonia lifted her gaze and met his eyes, holding them with a quiet intensity that made his breath hitch. You tell me, she said softly. Is there anything you need to confess? For a split second, just one, she saw it. Guilt. Raw and unmistakable. Then it vanished. I don't know what you're talking about, Fred said quickly. You're not making sense. You need help. He reached for his phone. Sonia grabbed his wrist with strength she didn't know she had. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered the forbidden name. Marcus Green. The room went silent. The curse cracked. Fred went pale. And Sonia knew, whatever happened next, the truth had finally begun to bleed through. Fred went white as a sheet the moment the name left Sonia's lips. The color drained from his face so quickly it was as if someone had pulled the life straight out of him. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He took an unsteady step backward, his eyes wide, fixed on her with a mixture of terror and disbelief. Where did you hear that name? He finally managed to ask, his voice barely more than a breath. From the man himself, Sonia replied. Her body still felt weak, her limbs heavy, but her voice was steady now, sharpened by resolve. I called him, Fred. I spoke to Marcus Green. He told me everything. Fred shook his head slowly, as if denial alone might undo what was happening. No, that's not possible. He told me about the contract, Sonia continued, sitting up straighter on the couch, forcing her trembling body to obey her will. He told me about the price. About how you traded my life for this baby. Fred stumbled as if struck. He hit the coffee table, knocking it slightly out of place, then collapsed onto his knees beside the couch. His hands came up to his face, fingers digging into his hair as a broken sound escaped his throat. I didn't, he stammered. I thought it was just superstition. I didn't think it was real. But you knew there was a price, Sonia said quietly. You knew something would be taken. And you signed it anyway. Fred looked up at her, tears streaming freely now, his expression raw and unguarded. I never believed it would actually happen, he cried. Marcus said a lot of crazy things, blood oaths, ancient agreements, forces older than language. It all sounded like theater, like a performance meant to scare desperate people into feeling like they were doing something meaningful. His voice broke. I didn't think you would really. He couldn't finish the sentence. When were you going to tell me? Sonia asked, her heart aching despite herself. Or were you just going to let me die, wondering why? No, Fred sobbed. I swear, no. I thought once you were pregnant, that would be it. That the rest was nonsense. I never thought. He collapsed forward, pressing his forehead to the floor. I'm so sorry, Sonia. I was desperate. 10 years of trying. 10 years of watching you cry quietly in the bathroom. 10 years of my mother's comments, of the looks people gave us, like we were incomplete. I just wanted to make you happy. I wanted to give you a child. He looked up at her again, his eyes red and pleading. I swear to you, if I had known the price was real, I would never have done it. Sonia wanted to scream. Wanted to unleash all the rage boiling inside her. But as she looked at him, broken, ashamed, drowning in regret, she saw the truth. He hadn't been cruel. He had been weak. And weakness, she was beginning to understand, could be just as dangerous. We have to break the contract, she said finally. Fred nodded immediately, desperation replacing despair. Yes. Yes. I'll call Marcus right now. I'll do whatever it takes. His hands shook as he grabbed his phone and dialed. Marcus answered on the first ring. Fred Turner, Marcus said calmly. I wondered when you'd call. Your wife beat you to it. You know, she has more courage than you do. I want to break the contract, Fred said, his voice firm despite the tears still streaking his face. Tell me what I have to do. It's not that simple, Marcus replied. The contract was sealed with your blood and your signature. Breaking it requires a sacrifice of equal value. Then take my life instead of hers, Fred said without hesitation. Let Sonia and the baby live. Take me. There was a pause. That's very noble, Marcus said slowly, and for the first time, something other than cold amusement colored his voice. But it doesn't work that way. The contract specifically requires the mother's life force to fuel the child's entry into this world. Sonia's chest tightened. So substitution isn't possible. No, Marcus said gently. It isn't. Sonia grabbed the phone from Fred's hand. There has to be something. Every contract has loopholes. What are you not telling us? Silence stretched between them, heavy and tense. When Marcus spoke again, his voice had changed. It was quieter. Almost sad. There is one possibility, he said. But it has never worked before. Sonia held her breath. It requires both of you to come to my office and participate in a counter-ritual. You will each have to offer something of great value. Not money. Not possessions. Something from your soul. Fred swallowed. What kind of things? Your pride, Marcus said. Your secrets. Your deepest fears. And even then, success is not guaranteed. When? Fred asked urgently. You're 15 weeks pregnant now, Marcus said, directing the words to Sonia. The ritual must be performed before you reach 28 weeks. After that, the bond becomes too strong. You will have until the end of your 6th month. Not a day longer. We'll be there tomorrow, Sonia said. Send us the address. The next day, they drove in silence. The city felt different as they crossed into its historic district, older, heavier, as if the past lingered in the bricks and narrow streets. The address Marcus sent led them to a weathered brownstone tucked between renovated cafes and law offices. The frosted glass door read, Green Consulting. Inside, the office was unsettlingly ordinary. Filing cabinets. A desk. A few chairs. No candles. No symbols. No darkness. Marcus Green stood as they entered. He was handsome, well-groomed, dressed in an expensive suit. He looked more like a lawyer than the architect of supernatural bargains. Thank you for coming, he said, gesturing for them to sit. Before we begin, there's something you should understand. He sighed. I'm not evil. Despite what you might think. I'm simply bound. He explained then how 10 years ago, he had been a doctor. How a mistake during surgery had cost the patient her life. How grief and guilt had driven him to make a deal to bring her back. How the deal twisted, trapping him in an endless cycle of facilitating contracts for desperate people. I tried to save one life, he said softly. Instead, I condemned many. He placed an old leather-bound book on the desk. This contains the counter-ritual, he said. It requires 3 participants. The one who made the contract. The one whose life is at stake. And the facilitator. That's you, Fred said quietly. Marcus nodded. And we must perform it on the night of the new moon. Fortunately, that's in 2 days. What happens during the ritual? Sonia asked. Each of us must confront our greatest failure, Marcus replied. Fred must publicly acknowledge his betrayal. Sonia, you must release your fear and choose love even if it costs you everything. And I must break my own binding. Fred's voice trembled. What will happen to you? Marcus smiled faintly. I don't know. But as Sonia watched him, she realized something chilling. For the first time since this nightmare began, the man who had terrified her looked afraid. Perhaps I'll finally be free, Marcus said quietly, his voice stripped of its usual composure. Or perhaps I'll face the punishment I've been avoiding all these years. Either way, I'm tired of being a monster. It's time to end this. Those words lingered in the air long after he spoke them, heavy with finality. Sonia felt the weight of them settle into her bones. For the first time since this nightmare began, she believed him. Marcus Green was no longer speaking like a man who enjoyed power or control. He sounded like someone standing at the edge of a cliff, no longer afraid of the fall. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation and reckoning. Fred did not hesitate. He sat at his desk for hours, writing and rewriting his confession, refusing to soften a single detail. He described the infertility, the desperation, the visit to Marcus's office a decade earlier, the blood he had signed with, the price he had agreed to without believing it was real. He admitted his cowardice, his selfishness, his willingness to gamble with his wife's life because he wanted to be a father more than he wanted to be honest. When he finished, his hands were numb. He posted it publicly. The response was immediate and brutal. Shock. Disbelief. Anger. Some called him insane. Others called him a monster. His mother called screaming, her voice breaking as she demanded how he could humiliate the family like this. Friends fell silent. A few cut contact entirely. Fred accepted it all. He answered every call. He apologized without excuse. He didn't defend himself. He didn't ask for forgiveness. The shame was suffocating, but he wore it like penance. Each insult felt deserved. Each accusation felt earned. Sonia watched him from a distance, her emotions tangled and raw. Part of her still hurt too deeply to speak. But another part of her saw something she hadn't seen in a long time, honesty. Not the comforting kind, but the kind that burns. While Fred faced the world, Sonia turned inward. Fear came for her constantly. In quiet moments. In the middle of the night. In the spaces between breaths. It whispered of failure and loss, of pain and death, of the fragile life growing inside her and the fragile hope tied to it. Every time panic surged, she placed her hand on her belly. She reminded herself that fear had shaped her entire life, fear of not being enough, fear of abandonment, fear that love was conditional. For 10 years, that fear had defined her marriage, her silence, her patience. Now, she made a different choice. She practiced breathing through the terror instead of running from it. She spoke softly to the child inside her, not with desperation, but with acceptance. Whatever the outcome, she would not face it drowning in fear. She chose faith in Fred's remorse. Faith in Marcus's desire for redemption. Faith that the universe might still have room for mercy. On the night of the new moon, the city felt unnaturally still. The sky was a deep, lightless black, as though the stars themselves had turned away. Fred and Sonia arrived at Marcus's office just after midnight. The building looked older than before, its brick facade darkened by time and shadow. Inside, the office had transformed. Strange symbols were drawn in chalk across the floor, intersecting circles and angular shapes that seemed to shift when Sonia stared at them too long. Candles stood at precise points, their flames unnaturally steady. The air felt thick, charged, humming with something unseen. Marcus stood at the center, his expression solemn. "Once we begin," he said quietly, "we cannot stop. The ritual must be completed. If it's interrupted, the consequences will be catastrophic, for all of us." Fred and Sonia looked at each other. They nodded. Marcus began to chant. The language was ancient, harsh and melodic at once, vibrating through the room like a living thing. The candles flickered violently despite the still air. Shadows twisted along the walls. The temperature plummeted, and Sonia saw her breath fog in front of her lips. "Fred," Marcus commanded. "Speak your truth." Fred stepped into the circle. For a moment, he faltered. Then he squared his shoulders and spoke. He confessed everything. Not just what he had done, but why. The pressure. The shame. The belief that his worth as a man depended on fatherhood. The resentment he had never voiced. The fear he had buried. "I chose my desire over my wife's life," he said hoarsely. "I told myself it wasn't real so I wouldn't have to face what I'd done. I was selfish. I was weak. And I betrayed the woman who trusted me most." As he spoke, the symbols beneath his feet began to glow red, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. "Sonia," Marcus said. "Release your fear." Sonia stepped forward, her hand resting protectively over her belly. "I've lived in fear my entire life," she said quietly. "Fear of not being enough. Fear of losing love. Fear that everything I want will be taken away." Her voice trembled but did not break. This pregnancy was supposed to fix everything. Instead, it became my greatest fear, the thing I wanted most becoming the thing that would destroy me. She inhaled deeply. "But I refuse to live like that anymore. Whatever happens tonight, I choose love over fear. I choose trust over control. I choose to believe that redemption is possible, for Fred, for Marcus, and for myself." The red glow intensified. The symbols began to move, sliding and rearranging into a new configuration that made Sonia's head spin if she stared too long. "And now," Marcus said, his voice shaking, "I must offer my sacrifice." He knelt at the center of the circle. "I was a doctor," he said. Marcus grinned. "And I killed a patient through my negligence." His voice cracked. Emily Richardson. 23 years old. She died on my operating table because I was tired, distracted, and careless. Tears streamed down his face. In my guilt, I made a deal to bring her back. The price was to facilitate contracts like mine, 10 lives for one. "Fred and Sonia, you are number 8. He bowed his head. I told myself I was trapped. That I had no choice. But the truth is, I could have refused. I could have faced justice. Instead, I damned myself and innocent people." His voice rose with resolve. "Tonight, I break that cycle. I refuse to complete the final 2 contracts. Whatever comes for me, I accept it." The moment he finished, the room exploded with light. It was blinding, overwhelming. Sonia screamed as something tore away from her, like a hook ripping free from deep inside her body. Pain surged through her and she collapsed, Fred catching her just in time. The sound that followed was impossible to describe, like thunder, like chains snapping, like something ancient screaming as it broke. Then, silence. When Sonia opened her eyes, The symbols were gone. The candles were nothing but melted wax. Marcus lay unconscious on the floor, breathing shallowly. Fred held her tightly. Is it over? They didn't know. The ambulance arrived minutes later, called by a neighbor who had heard the noise. Marcus was taken away, alive but unresponsive. No one could explain what had happened in that office. Sonia was taken to the hospital. The doctors examined her in stunned disbelief. The pregnancy is stable, one said finally. There is no sign of complications. Sonia wept. Months passed. Marcus survived, but disappeared. No one could find him. No records. No trace. Fred faced legal and social consequences. Their marriage did not magically heal. Trust had to be rebuilt slowly, painfully. Some days Sonia wasn't sure it ever would be. But the baby lived. On a quiet morning, Sonia gave birth to a healthy boy. As she held him for the first time, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: peace. That night, she dreamed of the field of dead flowers one last time. This time, the flowers were blooming. The boy smiled at her. You broke the pattern, he said. When she woke, the dream faded, but the peace remained. And for the first time in a very long time, Sonia believed the future belonged to her. Fred whispered her name, barely daring to breathe. Sonia's hand rested instinctively on her stomach, her fingers trembling as if afraid the moment would shatter if she moved too quickly. Then she felt it, a sudden, unmistakable kick. Strong. Steady. Alive. It was not the violent, unsettling flutter she had felt during the darkest weeks of her pregnancy, not the sensation that had carried with it a constant undercurrent of dread. This kick was different. It was normal. Healthy. Comforting. A sob escaped her lips as relief flooded through her body. I think so, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I think it's really over. For the first time since this nightmare had begun, she believed those words. Marcus stirred a few minutes later, groaning softly as consciousness returned. His movements were slow and careful, as though his body were learning how to exist within itself. When he finally opened his eyes, Sonia noticed the difference immediately. The heaviness that had once clung to him like a second skin was gone. In its place was something fragile but unmistakable: lightness. It worked, he murmured, almost to himself. The curse is broken. Sonia helped him sit up, studying his face carefully. You're sure? He nodded, wonder flickering across his features. I can feel it. The weight is gone. For the first time in years. I'm not being pulled. What about you? Sonia asked gently. Marcus smiled faintly. I don't know yet, he admitted. I suppose I'll find out soon enough. He met her gaze, his eyes clear and sincere. But whatever happens, thank you. For giving me the chance to do one right thing before the end. Those were the last words Sonia ever heard him speak in person. The months that followed felt unreal, as though life itself were cautiously testing the waters, waiting to see if the darkness would return. But it never did. Sonia's pregnancy progressed normally. The nightmares stopped. The sense of being watched vanished. Her body, once tense and fragile, slowly relaxed into the natural rhythms of impending motherhood. Fred remained by her side through it all, not out of guilt alone, but out of genuine devotion. He attended every appointment, asked every question, held her hand during every moment of fear. He never made another decision without her. Not once. When the day finally came, Sonia gave birth to a healthy baby girl. The delivery was long but uncomplicated. No sudden pain. No dark presence. No terrible price. Just the ordinary miracle of life entering the world the way it was meant to. When Sonia held her daughter for the first time, tears streamed down her face as a profound peace settled over her. The child was warm, real, and unmistakably alive. Fred stood beside her, trembling, his face transformed by awe and gratitude. They named her Hope. Because that was what she represented, not just survivor, but the possibility that light could emerge even from the deepest darkness. Fred proved himself worthy of his second chance. He became the kind of father he had once been afraid he could never be: patient, present, and deeply loving. He changed diapers at 3 in the morning without complaint, sang lullabies with a terrible voice that always made Hope laugh, and listened more than he spoke. He learned that strength wasn't about control or legacy, but humility and honesty. The shame of his public confession did not vanish overnight. Some people never fully forgave him. Others whispered behind his back. But time softened even the harshest judgments. People saw the way he lived now, with transparency, accountability, and quiet kindness, and slowly, forgiveness followed. As for Marcus, they heard from him only once more. About a month after Hope was born, an email arrived with no subject line. "I'm leaving the country. The consequences of breaking my contract are catching up with me, but I go willingly, knowing I saved at least one life. Take care of that beautiful baby. She represents everything good that can come from choosing right over easy." They never heard from him again. Years passed. Hope grew into a bright, curious child with an infectious laugh and eyes that seemed to see straight through people. She loved stories, especially ones about bravery and redemption. Sonia sometimes watched her play and marveled at how close they had come to never knowing this joy. When Hope was old enough to understand, Sonia and Fred told her the truth. Not all at once. Not with fear. But with honesty. They told her about the desperation that had led to a terrible choice. About the dark contract. About the courage it took to break it. About the importance of facing mistakes instead of hiding from them. They wanted her to know that her life had been fought for, not just by love, but by truth. Hope listened quietly, absorbing every word. When they finished, she reached for her parents' hands and smiled. "I'm glad you chose the hard way," she said simply. Sonia felt tears rise to her eyes. Hope grew up knowing she was deeply loved. Knowing that even the worst mistakes could be redeemed if faced with courage. Knowing that light always has a choice to rise. And that made all the difference. To be continued.